Good evening. The rule of six is now law in London. The government hopes the legislation will put the handbrake on the recent rise of COVID cases. Well, just a few weeks after the lockdown was eased, families now face being separated yet again. The capital's businesses will take the brunt. So, what are the new rules? Well, the new rule of six applies everywhere in England, indoors and outdoors, including pubs, parks and people's homes. Exceptions include organised team sports, weddings and funerals. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
London was basking in a late summer heatwave today, and on the banks of the Thames, people were making the most of it. Groups of office workers sat together, but in noticeably small groups. These friends who work in different M&S stores met for lunch, but thanks to the rule of six, it was a smaller gathering.
We all got together today, which was a planned thing. Obviously not as many as we intended to.
There was nearly 7 or 8 of us, and then we had to say no, there's only 6.
On a day like today, it's easy to forget winter is just around the corner, but not if you're a parent worried about the rule of six.
When the weather gets colder, we're living in small flats and we don't have areas for them to run around and things like that, so we really rely on going to all the baby groups and the nest, things like that, and they're all closed still.
The new rules have hit Peter Robertson's business hard. From his home in Richmond, he organises children's parties. Now his magicians, fairies and caterers are out of work.
Last week we had loads of inquiries. Everyone was excited about getting back to school. And within 5 days, the bookings have been cancelled, or the provisional bookings, they said, no, we can't do it. You know, quite right, but it's having a real effect. I mean, these performers, I mean, they're young parents themselves, you know.
Office Christmas parties could also be a casualty if the new rules aren't lifted. Vinegar Yard in Southwark can seat 600 customers, all socially distanced on tables of no more than 6.
We're just not going to take any bookings of more than 6 people at the moment. So what, looking at the big Christmas parties, is that's off the table for the foreseeable future. Obviously, we need to adhere to the government's rules and restrictions.
So I do support the rule of six. We've publicly come out in support of it.
When Sir Keir Starmer took part in an LBC radio programme this morning, he didn't know that someone at home was showing coronavirus symptoms. It means the Labour leader is now self-isolating until the test results come back. With more warm weather on the way this week, Londoners are likely to be tempted outdoors in greater numbers, putting the rule of six to the test. Simon Harris, ITV News.
Good evening. With pupils sent back to school and workers encouraged to return to their offices, it is perhaps unsurprising that the demand for COVID tests has increased. So much so, it would seem, that demand is outstripping supply. At a testing centre in Southend today, hundreds of people waited in line to get tested, only to be turned away. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, told the Commons the challenge was enormous after a sharp rise in people wanting a test. He said it will take a matter of weeks to resolve. Our political correspondent, Simon Harris, reports.
Queues are nothing new in the COVID era, but in Southend this morning, the line of people stretching around the block wasn't for a shop, but for a test centre. They began queuing before 7 o'clock, and when the doors opened at 8, many were unlucky. Sherry Ponsford's daughter began coughing in the early hours of this morning, so she headed for the test site.
A family crossed over to the car park as I was getting out, and the lady said to me, "Excuse me, love, I wouldn't even bother getting in the queue. We've been turned away after queuing for half an hour already because there's no more available tests."
Throughout the day, a succession of people wanting a coronavirus test were told there were no more available. People being turned away say they're being told it's because the government has recently restricted the number of tests allowed. So when the doors open at 8 o'clock in the morning, it's first come, first served. Today, around 200 people were left disappointed. John Reynolds is due to have eye surgery, but he needs to prove he's not infected. He too couldn't get a test.
I think it's ridiculous. I think it's absolutely broke. I think whoever designed the system should be stood up against a wall and shot. That's how I feel.
I can't book an appointment online, so I thought I'd just turn up and hope for the best, and I still can't get seen, and I can't go to work because I've got a continuous cough, a persistent cough, so until I get tested I can't go to work and get paid.
Bizarrely, the local council didn't even know the centre was offering tests to people who turn up on spec.
That's the first that we've heard as a council about that service being offered. All the advice that we've been told to disseminate has been that people should only turn up if they have an appointment.
In the Commons, the MP for Twickenham offered an extraordinary anecdote from some of her constituents.
However, a number of them have also been advised that if they put an Aberdeen postcode into the system, they can get a test in Twickenham. And they have succeeded.
The whole House knows that there are operational challenges and we're working hard to fix them. We've seen a sharp rise in people coming forward for a test, including those who are not eligible.
In Southend, they're confidently predicting another queue tomorrow morning.
Simon, Southend there, really just a snapshot of what's happening throughout the capital.
Yes, what we saw in Southend was the utter frustration, at times despair of people who need a test but just don't know where to turn. They've tried booking online without success, so they turn up and queue, and that doesn't work. Children who pick up a bug can't go to school, their parents can't go to work, and of course some of these people are key workers, essential workers. The Health Secretary said it would be sorted, but he said it would take days, weeks rather than days, which of course is absolutely no comfort to anyone who needs a negative coronavirus test right now.
Yeah, Simon, thank you. Good evening. For the second day running, hundreds of people living in Southend with symptoms of coronavirus were forced to queue again for hours round the block to try and get tested. And again, many were turned away, not knowing if they were infected, leaving people unable to work and children unable to go to school. Nurseries fear they may have to close if staff can't get tested. The Prime Minister had his say today, though. We have apparently the most thorough testing regime in Europe. Here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
In Southend, they were again queuing for tests today.
I think they've had quite a long time to sort this out. You'd have thought they'd have had enough tests for everyone by now.
The lucky ones who arrived early enough made the cut.
It was only through a Facebook page I saw this testing centre, so we came down first thing this morning.
But others were turned away.
I've just been told that I can't go in on my own because I'm literally a month away from being 18, and everyone in my family is vulnerable. I've got my mum who's got an autoimmune deficiency, my dad and my brother, which are both diabetics, and I've got no one to come with me. So they've turned me away and told me to go to a drive-through one. I've got my mum in the car park over there.
15 miles away at Munchkin's Nursery in Leindon, 3 members of staff are self-isolating at home because they can't get a test in Southend or anywhere else.
It's frustrating. I think with everything that we've had to tackle during COVID, and there's been many, many mountains that we've had to climb, both as a business and for caring for our children, it's just another obstacle that now seems to be getting in the way.
And the lack of tests could force nurseries to shut their doors. Nurseries are governed by strict rules which dictate the minimum number of staff allowed. When it comes to 1- and 2-year-olds, the ratio is 1 adult for every 3 infants. So if too many staff are off waiting for a test, the nursery has to close. Organisations representing nurseries and childcare providers are calling for them to be given priority in the queue for tests.
When it comes to testing, we are the poor relations. The reality is that if you're in a school, you have access, you have priority, but all of a sudden, when you get to look after children that are under 5, you seem to have been relegated to the back. We have promised that we could get access to these tests, and we can't.
The Prime Minister said 500,000 tests a day was now the government's target.
Everybody can see just in the last few days a colossal spike in the number of people who want tests and who want to ascertain whether they've got coronavirus. And what we're trying to do now is meet that demand at record speed.
But record speed might not be fast enough for nursery staff who need a test right now. And if nurseries close, it's yet another COVID headache for families. Simon Harris, ITV News, Leindon.
Good evening. They are the crucial crossings in and out of central London, but for months now, Hammersmith, Vauxhall and London Bridge have been closed to cars and lorries. Today, the Mayor came under pressure from the London Assembly over who pays the enormous repair bill for Hammersmith Bridge, currently more than 160 million. Well, small businesses trying to get back up and running after many difficult months say the closures and the congestion are making it even more difficult to get the economy moving. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Welcome to the congested zone. Gridlocked roads around southwest London, which have become a daily nightmare for drivers. Traffic on both sides of the Thames grinds to a halt as everyone heads for the Putney Bridge pinch point. And all because no one can agree a plan to reopen Hammersmith Bridge.
Right over there, literally across the river, is my place of work.
Una Lane runs a catering business just over the river from her flat. Crossing Hammersmith Bridge, it used to take her 7 minutes to get to work. Now she has to walk along the riverbank, often in the dark.
From Putney Bridge to my door is an hour and a half of unlit, poorly surfaced pathway, sheer drops of 23 feet into the River Thames at low tide, and really just something that one doesn't look forward to. You do it with dread.
The bridge is in need of urgent repairs after cracks were found, but Hammersmith and Fulham Council, City Hall and the government are at loggerheads over who should pay. The cheapest option is to make the bridge safe enough for people to walk across or cycle over. But even that would cost £46 million and take 9 months. Reopening it for buses, lorries and cars could cost as much as £163 million. In a semi-virtual Mayor's Question Time today, Sadiq Khan and his Conservative opponents were playing the blame game.
It's clear that only the government has the financial means to fund the necessary full repairs.
You have created incompetence and chaos on both sides of Hammersmith Bridge. You have caused an existential crisis. Are you so unwilling to act like a strong executive mayor?
What you should be doing is picking up the phone, speaking to Grant Shapps, speaking to Rishi Sunak, speaking to Baroness Fair and saying, pull your finger out.
Downstream from Hammersmith, 2 more of London's key river crossings, Vauxhall Bridge and London Bridge, are also closed to cars.
What we're seeing is that a fifth of London's bridges are now either closed or semi-closed, and this has a big impact on small businesses right across the capital. If you're a construction firm or you're a haulier, a logistic company, these have knock-on effects and impede your ability to do business.
The state of the 3 bridges is not helping the capital's reputation abroad. One American newspaper reported the closures under the headline, "London's bridges really are falling down." Simon Harris, ITV News, Hammersmith.
Good evening, I'm Suzanne Verdi. As millions across the country face new, tighter restrictions on mixing with family and friends, they don't for now apply to London. But there is deep concern about how the virus is once again spreading in the capital. Cases have surged in London in the last week to 25 per 100,000 people. The current rule of 6 restrictions mean this weekend's celebrations for Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, are curtailed. And the mayor has announced the capital's New Year's Eve world-famous fireworks have been cancelled. Our political correspondent, Simon Harris, has more details.
The East End is teetering on the brink of lockdown. Newham is one of the London boroughs in the front line. The number of COVID infections here and in neighbouring Redbridge is a cause for concern.
In the context of Newham, we're already mobilising the community, getting them ready for the possibility, the likelihood of some form of lockdown, be that pan-London or locally, because it's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
On the streets of East Ham, businesses struggling to recover from the last lockdown are worried. In the Lahori Nihari Curry House, they're only just managing to stay afloat and fear new restrictions could finish them.
If they shut down again, it's really difficult for the small businesses to reopen. Obviously, government helping a lot, but if they lock down again, it's very difficult for us.
Last week in London, there were just under 19 new cases of coronavirus for every 100,000 people. But now the rate is 25 cases per 100,000, even higher in some boroughs.
We're making plans to do what we need to do in London to avoid the virus spreading too much, because what we don't want to do is to see what we saw in March and April, the virus spreading, leading to too many positive cases, which led to too many lives being lost.
Enfield is another London borough with a worryingly high infection rate. Today in Edmonton, there were familiar queues outside a testing centre. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, said the government's strategy now is to keep the virus at bay until the cavalry arrives. The cavalry in this case is mass testing and a vaccine. Those waiting for a test seemed resigned to the idea of new curbs on everyday life.
I'm happy to abide by new restrictions. It's not a problem. My problem is we need to think of the children's education, for myself. You need to think of their well-being, and get in and out, uncertainty does affect them.
Everybody went into lockdown for 6 months, you know, and people shut themselves away. What's the point in having done that if it's then just going to repeat itself again? You've got to try and stop it before it goes way back up again, and I think they've got to put things in place.
I would feel all right with it because at the end of the day, the virus is getting a bit worse.
And in another signal that normal life won't return anytime soon, the Mayor cancelled London's New Year's Eve fireworks. Simon Harris, ITV News.
Well, we heard from Simon at the beginning of the programme, and he's here now. Simon, Jewish New Year, obviously very different this year, and now the fireworks have been cancelled in London. Just a few minutes ago, we've heard from the Prime Minister too.
Yes, a very sobering message in the last few minutes from Boris Johnson, who said effectively that a second wave is coming and it's inevitable that coronavirus will hit the UK again. I think that gives some context to the decision today to cancel the fireworks display, a huge event which attracts 100,000 people. But of course, we don't know in December whether we'll be in lockdown or whether the rule of 6 will still apply, neither of which are compatible with the idea of thousands of people gathering, unable to socially distance, on the banks of the Thames in what is effectively a massive street party. So cancellation was probably inevitable. Rio de Janeiro's done the same.
OK, Simon, thanks very much indeed.